The origins of Proto-Afro-Asiatics. So we'll begin from Shem to Israel. This is part one of a video series. So in order to know who the ancient Hebrews of Israel are, we must understand who were their ancestors according to the scriptures. The Israelites were the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But who were the ancestors of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? According to the Hebrew text, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, ancient ancestor was a man named Shem. If you read Genesis chapter 11, verse 10 through 26, it says, "This is the genealogy of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begot Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. After he begot Arphaxad, Shem lived 500 years and begot sons and daughters." So from 10 to 26 it reads, Arphaxad, Shelah, Eber, Peleg, Ru, Serg, Nahor. Now Terah lived 70 years and begot Abraham. So from the lineage, starting with Jacob to Israel, from Jacob to Isaac to Abraham, going from Abraham back to Shem, we see that this lineage is very specific and male-oriented. The Israelites basically are a Semitic people because they descend from Shem. According to outside sources or according to the academic understanding of the Israelites, they are also Semitic. The Israelites were a confederation of Iron Age Semitic-speaking tribes of the ancient Near East. The Hebrew people are mostly taken as synonymous with Semitic-speaking Israelites. So historically, the Israelites also spoke a Semitic language called Hebrew. Paleo-Hebrew script is the name used by modern scholars to describe the script found in Canaan, Canaanite inscriptions from the region of biblical Israel and Judea. Proto-Sinaitic, the North Semitic alphabet, is considered the earliest trace of alphabetic writing and the common ancestor of both the ancient South Arabian script and the Phoenician alphabet, which led to many modern alphabets, including the Greek alphabet. And so here is an example of the Proto-Sinaitic and Paleo-Hebrew. This is sort of like a timeline going backwards from where these scripts and languages come from. Paleo-Hebrew to Phoenician alphabet to Proto-Sinaitic script to even the Egyptian hieroglyphics. And here is a visual map showing from Paleo-Hebrew to Canaanite to Northwest Semitic to Central Semitic to Western Semitic and Proto-Semitic. So the Hebrew language also goes back to Proto-Semites, Proto-Semitic tongue. So the Israelites are ethnically a Semitic people because they descend from Shem. The Israelites are also linguistically Semitic because they descend from Shem. So the ancestors of the Israelites are Semites. Now, one important factor about the Semitic language is that it's part of the Afro-Asiatic language family. Afro-Asiatic, of, relating to, or being a family of languages widely distributed over southwestern Asia and Africa, including the Semitic. And then Semitic, of relating to or consisting of a subfamily of the Afro-Asiatic language family that includes languages such as Hebrew. Afro-Asiatic, also called Afro-Sam languages, formerly Hemito-Semitic or Semito-Hamitic languages of common origin found in the northern part of Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and some islands and adjacent areas in Western Asia. So here's a map of the Afro-Asiatic languages, and it is spread across the Middle East and in Africa. So, with that being said, Israelites are an Afro-Asiatic Semitic people. Therefore, we should look into the origins of Semitic and Afro-Asiatic. First, we'll take an academic approach to the birth of the Semitic and Afro-Asiatics. Then we'll take a biblical approach, which will be in the next video, part 2. But since we're taking an academic approach, we'll dive into genetics as well. The main genetic term we need to understand is a haplogroup, which I done a video on. You can refer back to that video for more information, but I'll give a quick breakdown right now of what a haplogroup is. So a haplogroup is a genetic population group of people who share a common ancestor on either their paternal or maternal line. Particular haplogroups are associated with well-known ancestral groups such as the Vikings, Aboriginal Australians, and Celts. By the way, this is from Living DNA. What are haplogroups? Living DNA explain. So, maternal haplogroup. Maternal haplogroups from the mother are determined by assessing mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA. This also means that you will have the same maternal haplogroup as anyone else in your direct maternal line. Your mom, brother, sister, aunt, and grandmother on your mother's side follow that haplogroup back to its origin, and you'll find a single mutation occurred at some point in history. So to simplify this, a mitochondrial haplogroup is passed down from mother to daughter, mother to daughter, mother to daughter. But the son can also have it. A man can have a maternal haplogroup as well because men carry both the X and Y chromosome. Now, what are paternal haplogroups? The paternal haplogroup relates to your Y chromosome, and since that is the sex-determining chromosome for men, it is passed down from father to son. Also, women don't have a Y chromosome. They will not have a paternal haplogroup by default. However, they are able to find out what their paternal haplogroup is if a male relative from the father's side, ideally a brother, father, uncle, or grandfather, is also tested. So to simplify this, the Y chromosome is passed down from father to son, father to son, father to son, and women do not carry this Y chromosome. But if a woman wants to know the male lineage of her male relatives, the men will have to take it, such as a brother and an uncle, father. And the only reason women don't carry the Y chromosome is because, of course, they can't carry both chromosomes like men. Men are both X and Y, and women can't do this. So that is why. And so to conclude, just keep in mind these terms. Y-DNA is paternal DNA, it's male, and then mtDNA is maternal DNA, that's female. And the men, as I said earlier, can carry both the paternal and the maternal, whereas women can only carry the maternal. So here's a visual representation of this. This is from ISOGG Wiki, and it says a haplogroup is a genetic population group of people who share a common ancestor on the paternal line and the maternal line. So have this as a representation of yourself, you having your father's paternal or Y-DNA, and then your mother's maternal line. This would be if you was a man, you'll carry both, but if you was a female, you'll only carry the mother. Here's another visual representation of this. Let's say you, a man and a woman have a child, two children, a son and a daughter, and so the son will carry both the father's Y-DNA and the mother's maternal DNA, represented in blue, and the sister will carry only the maternal DNA, represented in red. So, also haplogroups can be used to trace migrations, common descent, and ethnic origins. This is from What is a Haplogroup and What Can It Tell You About Your Family Tree? This is from ancestralfindings.com, and it reads, at its essence, a haplogroup is an ancestral clan. Some clans are the Vikings, Native Americans, all tribes, Celts, Aboriginal Australians, and other such groups. Your haplogroup tells you where your ancestors came from deep back in time. There are also male and female haplogroups, so you can see where your male and and female sides of the family originated back in prehistoric times. As you as with as with Y-DNA, which traces the male line from father to son, and maternal DNA, which traces the female line from mother to daughter, haplogroups also follow straight male and female descendancy lines. And here's a map to the right, basically representing haplogroups and people groups, like R1b being ancestral Eurasian clade, or haplogroup I1 being a North Proto-European clade. So here is haplogroups of the world. Every human being, every Homo sapiens sapien has a haplogroup, and here's basically just the distribution of these haplogroups throughout the world. So, linguists and geneticists commonly use haplogroups to find the genetic and linguistic origins and migrations of ancient ethnic populations. This is why it's important to know about haplogroups when studying the origins of Semitic and Afro-Asiatic. With that being said, let's begin. So, the origins of Afro-Asiatic and Semitic people. What are the genetic, linguistic, and ethnic origins of Semites and Afro-Asiatic? Another theory for the origin of Semites and Afro-Asiatic is the Arabian Peninsula. So let's look into the Arabian Peninsula origins of Afro-Asiatic. So the Winckler-Caetani theory, named after its two most distinguished prominents, Hugo Winckler and Leone-Caetani, claims that Arabia was originally a land of great fertility and the first home of the Semitic peoples. Through the millennia, it was undergoing a process of steady desertification, a drying up of wealth and waterways, and spread of the desert at the expanse of the cultivable land. The declining productivity of the peninsula, together with the increase in the number of inhabitants, led to a series of crises of overpopulation and consequently to a recurring cycle of invasions of the neighboring countries by the Semitic peoples of the peninsula. What's interesting about the Arabian Peninsula being one of the believed origins for Semitic people is that haplogroup E may have originated from this same location. One of the origins for haplogroup E is actually the Arabian Peninsula, which ties well with what we know so far about Afro-Asiatics having haplogroup E. 23andMe has actually covered this. They say it's possible that men carrying the DE haplogroup journeyed from Africa across the Red Sea and into the Arabian Peninsula. But it is also possible that DE originated within the Arabian Peninsula itself and later spread back to Africa. Geological distribution of these sub-Saharan African lineages in the Arabian Peninsula seems to indicate a prehistoric entrance of a noticeable portion of these lineages that participated in the building of the primitive Arabian population. The presence of two underived E-96 Saudi lineages raises interesting questions related to the microhaplogroup DE-YAP phylogeography. Regions near but external to northeast Africa, like the Levant or the southern Arabian Peninsula, could have served as a impetus for the early diversification of non-African unparental haplogroup varieties like Y chromosome DE-YAP star. This model would imply that both CF-P143 and the DE-YAP evolved nearby but outside Africa. One DE-YAP star ancestor would have spread to Asia and evolved to haplogroup D, while another DE-Yap star returned to Northeast Africa and evolved into haplogroup E. And by the way, this was from the study Saudi Arabian Y chromosome diversity and its relationship with nearby regions. And here is another study that I'm going to read dealing with haplogroup E originating in Arabia. This one is called Carriers of Mitochondrial DNA, microhaplogroup L3 basal lineages migrated back to Africa from Asia around 70,000 years ago. So it reads, the split of the Y chromosome composites DE haplogroup is very similar to the age of mitochondrial DNA L3, and Eurasian origin and back migration to Africa has been proposed for the African Y chromosome haplogroup E. This correlation rather seems to be the result of a joint and global replacement of the old autochthonous male and female African lineages by the new Eurasian incomers. So basically what they're saying is that haplogroup E could be Eurasian and that they came into Africa and they replaced the old autochthonous males and females, which would be haplogroups such as A and B. And therefore, this origin would have been outside of Africa. So where would it have been for haplogroup E? It reads, curiously, ancestral E star, and that star means a very old ancient form of E. So it says, curiously, ancestral E star lineages have been detected in the Arabian Peninsula and the Levant. So we do find ancient ancestral lineages of E, or clades or nodes of E, in the Arabian Peninsula and the Levant. So biologically, some believe Semites come from Arabia and that they were a brown Mediterranean people, also known as Euro-African. So this right here comes from the Field Museum of Natural History by Henry Fields. You can find on page 154, and it reads, physical anthropologists are certain that Mesopotamia was the eastern borderline for Semitic types of individuals, and that the Semites, whom we know as the brown Mediterranean peoples who invaded Mesopotamia from Arabia. Here is a book called General History of Africa, Volume 2, Ancient Civilizations of Africa, and it reads, particularly when we note once more that Mediterranean is not a synonym for white. Elliott Smith's brown or Mediterranean race being nearer the mark. Elliott Smith classes these Proto-Egyptians as a branch of what he calls the brown race, which is the same as Sergei's Mediterranean or Euro-African race. The term brown is, in this context, refers to skin color and is simply a euphemism for Negro. So that's very interesting. So here's a book called The Passing of the Great Race. In this section on page 282 talks about the Euro-African and the Mediterranean race, and it says the Mediterranean race was first defined by Sergi, who also called it Euro-African. The Mediterranean race originated in Africa and is closely related to the Negro, both being long-headed, long-skulled peoples descended from a common stock, the Euro-African. So, therefore, if Semites do come from Arabia, and if Semites are a brown Mediterranean, brown Euro-African people, then phenotypically wise, they would have looked Negroid. So this is basically the ancient population of Arabia. And many people actually do subscribe to this. This is a book called The Arabs by Bertram Thomas. It says the original inhabitants of Arabia then, according to Sir Arthur Keith, one of the world's greatest living anthropologists, who has made a study of the Arab skeletal remains, ancient and modern, were not the familiar Arabs of our own time, but a very much darker people. A proto-Negroid belt of mankind stretched across the ancient world from Africa to Malay, giving rise to the Hamitic people of Africa, to the Dravidian peoples of India, and to the intermediate dark people inhabiting the Arabian Peninsula. Here's another book called The Negro in the New World, and it reads, "It is quite conceivable that the great peninsula of Arabia was once populated as far as its natural conditions allowed by a primitive Negro stock." Now, this is very interesting because this sort of lines up with the DNA. Remember from the study, it says these sub-Saharan African lineages in the Arabian Peninsula seems to indicate a prehistoric entrance of a noticeable portion of these lineages that participated in the building of the primitive Arabian population. The presence of the two underived E-M 96 Saudi lineages raises interesting questions related to the microhaplogroup DE-YAP phylogeography. Therefore, the Proto-Ethiopic phenotype would probably be the best fit for these early Semites, originating in the Arabian Peninsula. And here is the Proto-Ethiopic type. And this, again, like I'm saying, is probably a good example. But to conclude, the ancestors of the Israelites, Afro-Asiatic Semitic people, could have emerged from the Arabian Peninsula. Their genotype would likely be haplogroup E based on the studies we just read, and their phenotype would likely be brown Mediterranean and brown near African based on the books we read. Here's all the information put together for this. The Winckler-Caetani theory about Semites originating in Arabia, along with the phenotype of what these people could have looked like, as well as the genotype that seems to match the time period of when all this is going down. So we conclude with this study, the origins of Proto-Afro-Asiatics, and returning back to the main point, as I said, if the Israelites are a Semitic people, an Afro-Asiatic people, and if their ancestors are also a Proto-Semitic people, then it is likely that they would be carriers of haplogroup E, both their ancestors, their Proto-Semitic ancestors, and the Israelites themselves. And I'm basing this on logic and on the studies we've read about the origins of Afro-Asiatics, Proto-Semites, and haplogroup E. And I believe this is the best way to go about things when it comes to studying these people. And so far, this is what I am leaning towards when it comes to the Y chromosome, the Y DNA of the Israelites. It would be an E marker. And this is where we conclude. Hopefully you enjoyed this presentation. Leave a comment, like, and subscribe. And there will be more information and videos coming out soon. And we will have Q&As one day where you can ask me questions. And have a great day. Shalom.